I'm here with Brendan McCauley from the Humanum project. We just interviewed you on Life on the Rock, and I wanted to ask you about a topic we didn't talk much about, and that's dating. It's so vital to our future as a nation of people in the church that we need to get married, need to stay married. You've had a lot of experience out there, young man, and I was hoping just to get some tips from you.
Yeah.
Not from me.
Yeah. I mean, that's the big issue. At least, I'm 27 years old. I live in Nashville. It's a big young adult Catholic community, a lot of single people, and navigating the dating world is hard right now. And it's full of dating apps. There's been the hookup culture, and the Dating Project, the documentary that was done a few years back, kind of depicts the dating culture, but also just practically how do you go on a date. And this Professor Cronin, she was the professor, and she said to all of her students, all right, you want extra credit, kids? You got to go on a traditional date. And what does that look like? Well, you got to ask them out face to face. Be intentional. Don't say, hey, do you want to hang out? Or, make sure it's a date. Under 90 minutes, it's something simple. You can go on first dates with many different people. You're just getting to know the person, nothing serious yet, no alcohol. And what she said was no physical contact. Well, fine, you can do an A-framed hug, which is shoulders in, hips out, So none of the students did the extra credit. They were too scared, too nervous. And then she said, all right, you want to pass my class? You got to do it. Wow. So.
And women were allowed to ask men?
No, yeah, women could ask the guy. Yeah, that was a part of the dating assignment. And they interviewed all of them afterwards. And I'll never forget two answers. One person said, the feeling I got when that girl said yes was better than any hookup I've ever had. And then another person said, it's harder to ask someone out face to face than it is to sleep with them in a dark room where you can't see their face. So this is showing us that at least the hookup culture, which is so prevalent in young adults, college campuses, doesn't satisfy us. We want to be known. That's what we want more than a hit of pleasure. We want to be known. And I think that Dating Project helped bring that to light. And so what I usually kind of tell people about dating, don't take it too seriously. Just go out, meet people, talk to them. If you get rejected, great. Helps you to grow up, helps you to be stronger. But dating is about getting to know one another. And then it's a discernment of marriage. If it's only going to end in you marrying them or breaking up. So you got to date intentionally, the values that you want in a future spouse, a husband, a wife, take it seriously, but have fun while you're at it, in the sense of, be yourself, laugh, do adventurous things, but be intentional, because it's a discernment to marriage.
And what do you think are important values to look for in a spouse?
Yeah, so obviously number one would be faith, being Catholic. I mean, being Catholic isn't something that we just do. It's the very essence of our humanity. I would say to be fully human is to be Catholic. And so it's going to permeate every part of my life. I would want my wife to also want that to permeate every part of her life. So I'd say that. And then also, being a good mother, that's very, very important. And then, out of those two things, there's room. People are imperfect, but, I'll just kind of more be personal with me. It's, I would like to have someone that could make me laugh. I would like that. That's pretty important to me. Someone who could, I don't know. That's just more personal for my own,
Gotta have fun with things.
Joke, poke fun, sarcastic. That's kind of my humor.
Right.
So, but someone who, Jordan Peterson, I listen to a lot of Jordan Peterson. I think everyone knows Jordan Peterson at this point. But he also talked about, which I think is great, is within dating is finding someone, and then marriage, someone who will call you higher, who's not just comfortable where you're at, in your brokenness, who will love you in it. But hey, there's a greater good that we're going to go towards, union with God forever. And to have someone who's not on board with that, of calling you out when you need to be called out, and pushing you, but also loving you along that journey, that's going to be hard. So I think that's important too.
What do you see? You're in Nashville, a lot of young adults up there. What do men complain about? What do women complain about?
Oh my gosh, the complaining. Yes, there's a lot. There's, I think the women are just like, gosh, guys, like pursue us. Like stop being so afraid and go on dates, ask girls out. Like, I think there's a lot of that. I mean, I think also maybe some women might not be dating that much because it's like, well, I want a guy with a ton of money, or I want a guy who, I don't know, just has all of their stuff put together, who is, 6'2", just the strongest guy. And it's like, okay, let's be realistic.
Yeah.
So, but I think at the end of the day, yeah, a lot of women are wanting, like, guys, man up, like pursue us, ask us out, don't be afraid of rejection.
Yeah.
Guys, and then on the other, I think guys might say, well, I have been, and you're just rejecting me. There's been, I just know a lot of guys that it's just constant rejection. And, but I also see on the guys' end where they might be looking for the supermodel, the perfect person that, only Mary was the perfect woman. And so I think there needs to be, I think we need to get back to reality, get off the media that's telling us a message about what a man or what a woman is and what you deserve. I mean, it's fantasy. It's not real. We need to get back to reality and realize people are imperfect. I'm not going to find, quote, the perfect person, but yeah, and I think we discover that the more we get out and get to know one another,
Yeah, I was struck before the show. You were telling me too, like, back in the pre-sexual revolution, I guess. Not even that far back, but you kind of were connected to your local community, and that was the choice you had.
Yeah.
Now, because that is a source. Studies show, like, in these like Scandinavian countries actually rank the most happiest, right? Some of them, and they said there wasn't a great as disparity of wealth. Most people had similar amounts, so they were happier. If you're always being presented with people's lifestyles, whatever, that have more, it's like we're always thinking, well, I need that, or I need what neighbor Jones has, whatever. And now that's like on steroids, because we can just see all these images of beautiful things and lifestyles and stuff. But and like realistically, yeah, I mean, it's like finding a person you can live with and love, and as a good person, is more important than like superficial things.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, especially like just dating apps. Like, I've been on dating apps before. I know many people who are trying. It's like, this is how you just got to get to know one another. But you could be spending hours on a dating app and messaging someone. You haven't really met them. You're trying to set up a date, and then they'll just stop responding.
Yeah.
And this doesn't just happen once. This happens 95% of the time. And then you're just like, well, I'm going to delete this app. It's a waste of time, because for some reason, people like maybe the first initial match. Oh my gosh, I'm desired here. I'm wanted here. Wow. But then once you get to the reality of, all right, let's go on a date. Let's meet in person. It's like, whoa. I don't know if I'm ready for that. I'll stop responding.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, we're so influenced by this, social media, and it's like, we're just so afraid. And maybe, I think, at least myself, people that I know who are my age, it's like the college culture and like just people not living out God's plan for sexuality and just being hurt and wounded puts up walls of like, gosh, how can I trust someone?
Right.
And then dating now becomes fearful, For women, it might be, well, guys have always hurt me. How could I trust a guy?
Yeah.
And you know, whatever the fear or the shame might be, you close your heart off. And now it's like you can't be in relationship because you've closed your heart off. And then we get frustrated because we're hardwired for relationship. So I think right now a lot of young adults are having a hard time with the dating scene.
Yeah. I remember, this is some years ago on Life on the Rock, we interviewed a woman that was in youth ministry, a young adult ministry, and she was a young adult, and in the DC area, which has the highest concentration of like young adults. And she said they had a lot of good men that were available, but she said they were afraid. They wanted to get all their finances in order, and you know, before they get married, and so they kept putting it off. And, she was really frustrated by that. But I get it. I mean, it seemed like everything costs so much, you know, you want that security.
But it's, you know, my grandma, I've talked to my grandma about this, and my grandparents, my grandpa owned his own business, you know, made good money. They live like on the water.
Yeah.
And, you know, people flip on the, you know, social media, and they'll see, you know, guys in their 30s who might have that lifestyle, living on the water, you know, nice car. And it's just like, oh, like this is normal. It's like, and then my grandma told me, like, actually we got married and we were struggling financially, and we were in a 1-bedroom apartment, not very nice, and we were struggling to get by, but we did it together, and we worked together, supported one another, and we got through it. And it's like, that's actually more of the reality of when you get married in your 20s. It's like you're both dirt poor, you know, but what? You do things together, and you love one another in it. And so, I mean, obviously, you know, for women, they seek a man who can provide and who's stable, secure, and, you know, that's important. You know, you'd want a hardworking guy, but you wouldn't want to say my standard is he's got to be making, you know, 150 grand when he's 25 years old. It's like, let's be realistic here, you know. But so I think, we got to just come back to reality a little bit.
And in the young adult scene today, what is a good way to meet people? Church or groups?
So I'm lucky, I'll be honest, I'm lucky being in Nashville because there's just so many young adults. I know a lot of people in different parts of the country that's like, there's just no young adults. So get involved. The first thing would be get involved in your church community. And I mean, if you're single, I bet you have a lot of time on your hands. Like, go to as many events, you know, and just start meeting people. And once you get plugged into one group, they might invite you to other groups. And that's what my experience has been like. I've just gotten overwhelmed by the amount of people I've met. So, I mean, I think that would be my first thing is, get involved in your church community.
And what would you tell a young man out there how to ask somebody out?
I would.
Do you stalk them or spy on them, or how does that work?
Very simply. Typically, girls, I've talked to girls about this. So if you know you're at a church gathering, an event, and you see a beautiful woman, if you just walk straight up to them and say, "You're beautiful, I want to take you out on a date," they will be kind of, whoa, like, I don't know you, who are you? And all. So that can be, okay, sometimes it can work, and I'm not saying like absolutely do not do that, but some girls are like, whoa, like that's kind of quick.
You don't know me.
You don't, And so I mean, for instance, like that, it could be go up to them, introduce yourself. Typically, if you do that, they'll probably know you're interested in them. A lot of guys don't go up to girls randomly just to introduce themselves who are not interested. That's, you know, but of course you don't know yet. So as a guy, you talk to them, get to know them. And then maybe at the end, you could just, something simple. Hey, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I'd love to continue getting to know you. I'd love to take you out on a date. Like it could be simple, you know, as that.
Or just meet for coffee or something.
I mean, I think coffee is a great first date. And, you know, not a movie. You're not talking. Something simple, nothing too serious. You're getting to know one another.
Now you're from the land of coffee, right? You guys are serious coffee drinkers. That's Washington State.
In Seattle, Seattle area. I do like my coffee. I like a nice cappuccino if I could have my choice every day.
Well, that's great. What do you hear from women? What are their complaints, or what do they hope for, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think they just want, again, this is what, I think they do want this. And I think at times they might be hesitant to choose it. But they want a good man. What do I mean by a good man? I would say a good man is a man who is conformed to the person of Jesus Christ, who is the icon of masculinity, which is he served. He gave his life, the strength, the power to lay down one's life. That might be with work. You know, I'm going to work hard. I'm going to lay my life down so I can provide for a family. Like, I think women find that one of the most attractive. That's like the most attractive. But they also want a guy who's fun and who's funny, who doesn't take themselves too seriously. You know, I think those are a couple attributes, but what I am seeing is they want security. They're looking for where they could go down a dark alley and they're not scared. They're not worried. Yeah. You know, someone who's a provider, who's strong, but also, you know, interiorly strong. That's the heart of a man. But that's what I would say.
Yeah, it seems like I hear as a priest sometimes too. It seems like as everybody gets older, it's like you're just looking for a nice person that's got some kindness, some humility, that can apologize, you know, and recognize their weaknesses. And
I'm also seeing when women are in their 20s, I'm seeing, oh my gosh, the guy's gonna be perfect. He's gonna have a six-pack. I mean, it's gonna be the perfect man. And then once I talk to women who are in their 30s now, it's like, whew, I want to be married. Like, I want to be married, and I just want a good man.
Right.
Like, that's what he could have a little belly. Like, I just want a
good.
I just want to, you know, and it's like at the end of it, that's what they've always wanted.
Right.
You know, because that's what marriage is, a long term, forever. You know, until death. And so.
And I think some people, it's like you don't realize some of those aren't the spectacular virtues, but they really pay off in relationships and maybe parenting. That you're faithful, that you're a servant, you're going to show up, you're responsible. You know, it's not sexy virtues, so to speak. It's just, like you said, someone reliable, a solid person. And so.
Yeah.
I also wanted to ask you, you're working on a book. That sounded really interesting. Tell us about your book.
Yes, I started about 4 years ago. And I was sitting, or maybe 5 years ago when the idea popped in my mind, I was sitting at the John Paul II Institute in class, and we were learning about culture. What is the heart of culture? And culture is how we talk, how we dress, movies, music, you know, all that's an expression of culture. And the word culture means a society's expression of who they think they are before God. That's the definition of culture. So I was like, that's it, identity. If we have a proper identity as male and female, we have a flourishing culture. If we don't, we have a terrible culture. And so all of these questions what's at the heart of culture and society? What is a human being? In all morality, you know, my body, my choice, born in the wrong body, all of these actions that we're arguing about has an anthropology underneath it. What is a human being? So I was like, okay, that's a good question. What is marriage? Also the fundamental cell. Sex, love, freedom. These core questions, I was like, I'm curious of what people would say, you know? So I started interviewing people from all around the world, Buddhist, Hindus, atheists, agnostics, people from Egypt, China, throughout Europe, all around the world. And I'm asking them these questions in a Socratic kind of dialogue. And I'm figuring out most people don't know the answer, and they'll even say it. And so the book is where you can read these people's answers in an interview format, and then I'm going to be giving the Catholic answer in depth to those 6 questions as a proposal of this is the truth revealed in light of Jesus Christ that actually orders our society, to flourish. So it's a very simple structure of a book. What is a human being? Answers from around the world. You can read those answers. What is a human being? The Catholic answer.
Yeah.
And that's more in depth. So that's what the book is about. Yeah.
Did you literally call people?
Yeah, so through my own studies, I've gotten to know people who live around the world. And so would reach out to them. Like I knew Catholic priests from India. So I reached out to them. I said, hey, do you know any Muslims?
Yeah.
Do you know any, who would be interested interviewed? Yeah. So I did that, and I got about 35 people interviewed, and I wanted to get to 50. And I was having a hard time. I was asking around, couldn't find anyone. So what I started to do was all the big cities in the US, I would start calling like mosques. Like I'd call like Orthodox churches. And I'd just say, hey, I'm doing a project, would love to interview you. And I was able to get up to 50. Interviewed like a Russian Orthodox bishop.
Wow.
I interviewed a Buddhist monk.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was fascinating. So fascinating.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is there, I don't know if you could possibly summarize that, but what are maybe some of the answers you remember or?
Yeah. So all, the atheists, agnostics, the reductionist view, where they just see the world as a clump of cells, pretty much. One woman from South Korea summed it up by saying, I haven't really thought about these questions, but I'm in the mindset that you can call yourself whatever. You can call your union whatever. You can do whatever you want to do and call it anything. So, in other words, everything's meaningless. I'll never forget this answer to what is sex. There was a guy, what is sex? And he said, sex is the pressing together of flesh. And so I said back in a question, what's the difference between sex and shaking hands, which is also pressing together of flesh? And he said, there's no difference.
Wow.
And he's like, we make such a big deal that there's such a difference. He's like, it's not, it's just pressing of flesh.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that
was an atheist?
That was a Christian.
A Christian, wow.
Yeah, but he had agnostic tendencies.
Yeah.
But then I get a lot, the love is a feeling. Love is a feeling. But I'll never forget this one atheist. He said, love is a feeling. And I said, so are you saying feeling is identified with love, or do feelings accompany love? Or would you actually identify love with the feeling? And he's like, say that again. That's fascinating. Did you say feelings accompany love but aren't love? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, I need to think about that one. Because that's what the Catholic view is that our feelings, our attractions participate in love. They accompany love, but they aren't identified with love, because love is rooted in the will. So, because then I'll ask, is it a good feeling? And they'll be like, it's a great feeling. And then I'll be like, what about sacrifice? Dying or suffering for, that's not a good feeling. And then they get thinking, oh my gosh, maybe love is deeper than a feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, those are a couple.
And then some of the Catholic answers that you would write about, how would I say the Catholic view of love?
Yeah, the Catholic view of love. So it's, at its apex, at its source, God is love. God is love. Who is God? A communion of persons. So in my studies, I learned Thomas Aquinas kind of popularized the term, love is to will the good for another for their own sake. John Paul II, in his Love and Responsibility, kind of took up that definition, but expanded it to, yes, it is to will the good for another, but more deeply, it's to give of oneself for the good of another. It's to make a gift of oneself, is what John Paul II kind of describes love. And that then forms a communion. The completion of that love forms a communion. So I'd say, will the good of the other, a greater expression that is the gift of self a total gift of self, celibacy and marriage, which is a total expression of love in the created world, and then God is love, which is communion of persons. That's kind of how
Yeah. Yeah, and the celibacy question, I have some like devout Protestant friends, and they really, they have a hard time with celibacy, but I have forgotten. I just was reminded of this the other day, that Jesus talks about those who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
He says it pretty clearly there. I mean, we always go to St. Paul. It's better to be
Yeah.
unmarried and all this, but I thought Jesus himself is talking about for the sake of the kingdom. Now, the Catholic view, it is a gift given to some. Not everybody's called to celibacy. Most are called to marriage and stuff. But that it is possible, and it is, because it really helped me in my own discernment of celibacy, and thinking, can I do this, and do I want to do this? But in reading John Paul II too, and Dietrich von Hildebrand, he would talk about, that marriage was the greatest earthly good, and there's no giving and taking of marriage in heaven. It's that we don't have the sacrament of marriage in heaven. That's fulfilled in the union of Jesus and the church. And so I'm saying, if celibacy is just some endlessly frustrating thing, like eternity is going to be a very long time.
Yeah.
That's kind of a cheap way to say it. But I thought, is God not enough? If you're given this gift and calling, we have to say God's enough to sustain us, right? And
Yeah.
But that kind of helped me in discerning it.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, that's why celibacy is called, it's a sacrifice, because
Right.
there's a sacrifice of giving up of something that is good, marriage,
Yeah.
but for something that is to come, but
Right.
also living here and now.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's a painful death. I mean, I'm not a vowed celibate, but like I'm living a celibate life.
Right.
And, there's crucifixion like it hurts. Like there's a
Yeah.
pain, because like we long for intimacy and touch and love. And, of course, God is the only one that can satisfy us, but at times we don't experience that, experience love,
Yeah.
or at least how we want it to be, with ecstasy and joy. Where we might be experiencing it as pain and sacrifice, and that can, it can be hard to like, okay, Lord, I trust you in the midst of, I can't see you or feel you. I trust you that you will satisfy me,
And everything worthwhile involves sacrifice.
Yeah.
It's going to cost something. It's going to take something. And something I've reflected, we had the big gay marriage debate in this culture and stuff. I was thinking, one thing that really hamstrings us today is that we are having less people get married, and less people maybe living it successfully. And it seems like, when I would talk to couples, it's like they had a deep sense that, two men getting together is not the same thing that we're doing here, having kids and everything. And like, theologically, like the cultural, I mean, the sexual difference allows this union, this coming together and to form one flesh union. It takes a difference, right, to do that. And there's this beautiful complementing of one for the other, and certain gifts and things one has, the other can have. And but I thought, if more people live marriage, it's like, obviously, these two things are not equal, right?
Yeah. So this is interesting, what I've learned from Christopher West, and I think he puts it brilliantly. But the world says, no, they're similar. They're similar. Right. There's not really a difference. And the reason why, Christopher West has said, is because we live in a contracepted culture. So a man and a woman with their bodies can come together and create new life. No two men, no two women can do that.
Right.
But, in other words, you can't bring two men, two women to that level. But you can bring the level of a man and woman and their offspring down to the level of like two men and two women, which is what? A sterilized union. That's what it is. And so we can't really see the difference. Why? Because, well, sexuality in our culture has been separated from procreation.
Right.
The sexual act no longer has to do with procreation.
Right.
Right. Well, so if sexual desire is now divorced from procreative, the procreative end and procreation, well, you can take that anywhere with anyone, and it's the kind of the same playing field of morality.
Yeah.
So that's why the legalization of gay marriage happened in the U.S.
Right.
Because it happened after legalization of contraception in 1965.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing the gender confusion, which is just another fruit of that. The body is meaningless. And it all stems back from contraception, which comes from a dualistic view of the human person. The body doesn't really matter to who I am in my morality.
Right.
And now you have what we have today,
Right.
which is a mess.
Yeah, it's a serious mess. And as a priest too, and hearing confessions and working with couples and things, it is interesting to see the differences, the male-female difference, and it's hard to stereotype it or whatever. But one thing that impresses me, like women have this ability like to surrender. They surrender with their bodies. Like they like to conceive, to bear a child. All the suffering that entails, and men, they're the giver of the gift. I don't know how you want to say that, but it's like they sacrifice. Women certainly, sacrifice, supremely in many cases. But there's also, I think, in men this ability to give of themselves and to serve, and it's almost like the woman just naturally has to be cognizant that, she's a mother, she has children, right? She has to think of them first. So maybe it's harder for her to give herself as freely to different things because she is the immediate, have this immediate importance to her kids. And it seems like the guy can give himself. This was years and years ago, but I was a priest, but I went on this camping trip. They had these RVs and stuff. We were in this kind of state park, and so a bunch of guys getting together. We cooked out on a campfire and all this, had like a picnic table and stuff. And it was time to clean up. These guys all jumped into action. They were all married men, all had kids.
Yeah.
And I was like seriously impressed by, they just got up and went to work with something, the whole weekend, whatever needed to be done, there was guys there doing it. And it was great to see that they were using their talent, skills, and everything to serve, And oftentimes we don't think of that. I mean, sometimes you think guys on watching TV on a couch, and that certainly happens. But it is in them. And I think it is in their nature in a special way.
They want to. I mean, if I look at my own heart and what I want, like the most attractive guys in regards to like, this is the model, this of who I want to be. It's like when I hear about Maximilian Kolbe, when I hear about John Paul II, when I, watch Avengers Endgame, Iron Man sacrificing his life, Jack sacrificing his life in Titanic. Like, wow, the strength to lay down your life. I want to have that strength, and then I look at my heart, it's like, I don't, and I need Christ to give it, by his grace. Right. But it's like, no, that's what I want. No, I think Matt Fradd, he gave a talk once. He's like, at your eulogy, do you want to be remembered as the guy who was just addicted to pornography his whole entire life? And like, that's what people only know you for. It's like, no, no man would ever want to be known for that, but maybe a man who might have an addiction, but is known as a man who their whole life has deeply fought it in all they could have done, such as Saint Mark G. I don't know if you know him, but he was an opioid addict and died an addict and is a saint. And, so I think, I think men in their nature, if they're deep down, they don't want to use people. They don't want to be selfish.
Yeah.
They would want to be selfless. It's like.
And you see that like in man's history oftentimes, being the provider historically and stuff, going out and breaking their backs, working.
Yeah.
That's sacrificial, whether it's agriculture or industrial revolution, whatever way it is,
Yeah.
Laying down their lives for their families like that. And I was watching this documentary on New York, and it was about just the history of the city and its building, and it's such an icon of America, it's all that immigration that took place. You had, like the various different groups of people in one location ever, like historically, it's happened in New York, the greatest.
Yeah.
But what the city achieved, bringing water into the city, electricity, a subway system, and all this, and even just building Central Park, that was fascinating.
Yeah.
They needed a park to get out of this congested city, so they brought nature into Manhattan,
That's hilarious.
and sculpted a park and stuff. But I forgot where I was going with this. I could take a break here. What was it, 36?
Yeah. We may be talking about just like men of like giving them themselves and working in New York City.
Yeah, just an icon of the industry of man, and just in America too, how it's just like wide open for wanting to achieve and do and stuff. And obviously it's got to be moderated and got to be in service. It's not just about selfish pursuits, but I think America's got a great history of that.
Yeah, I think we've lost the sacrifice and the commitment.
Yeah,
because the marriage rate is dropping. What are men doing? Well, men are just pursuing money. They're pursuing their own career, and being just bachelors, just drinking it up, partying it up, smoking cigars, and then maybe going on dates or trying to like get a beautiful girl, but not really committing to her. And it's like, well, now you're 35, now you're 40, and then because people just see marriage nowadays as, oh my gosh, it's just so hard and burdensome. And so then the women are doing the same. It's like, well, I'm going to get my career then. Like, no, I'm not. Motherhood, that's the radical feminism. Motherhood, no, that's enslavement for me.
Right.
I don't want to do that. And it's like, we got to go back to if we keep going down that path, that ethos, where is it going to end up? Well, the human race is going to be gone, and so it doesn't work. It's not how we're called to live.
Right, and I think women, it's like now, you can get out and you make a lot of money, have a big career, and that gives you financial security and freedom. You can see why it's compelling, and like nobody's going to celebrate you very much for being a mother or serving in the family. It's not profitable, so you can see the temptation for them. But I feel, at the end of the day, I just like look at my grandparents, and they were like so focused on the grandchildren and just family.
Yeah.
It's like, they had, our grandfathers had whatever careers and things, but that was not the most important thing to them. And it's like there's a season in our life, especially like you're young, to pump that time and energy into a family when it's really maybe hard with a lot of babies and stuff. Yeah. You want to get on that when you're kind of young. Right?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's, with the sexual revolution and, the divorce rate skyrocketed to 50%. And so, 50% of broken families, well, what about the other 50%? Are they perfect? It's like, no, they're probably really struggling too. And it's like, we're just so wounded in families that I just see that we're really wounded, nowadays. And it's like, to have a family, well, my family's wounded. Right. Do I want more woundedness? Right. I've even met someone who said like, I don't want to get married because I don't know if I can ever trust a human being, because humans are imperfect.
Mm-hmm.
And that stems from, he told me ultimately his own father, cheating on his mom.
Right.
And he's just like, just a deep wound. Like, how can I trust anyone?
Yeah. In your book that you're working on, was that one of the questions too about family or?
Not necessarily, no, just what is a human being? What is marriage, sex, love, freedom, and where did you get your beliefs? So, I mean, I addressed family in regards to, marriage and sex and all that, but not necessarily where I focused
Right.
in on talking about the family and.
Yeah. And Pope Benedict talked about the evangelical character of the family, the power and how it evangelizes. And I think today too, that is such a witness that can draw people to Christianity, because if they see, hey, you Christians have some good families, there's something naturally in us that want family.
Yeah.
And if this group of people is living it well, what are they doing? What do they have? I want what they have.
Yeah.
And I think, Christianity sets us up to succeed in marriage. One, as Catholics, it's a sacrament. And so God's going to strengthen it. He's going to give us grace to fulfill it and to live it. But just Christian virtues of service and love and sacrifice and things builds a strong family.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, we are formed by the community and the neighborhood, so if we have a healthy neighborhood of strong families, of love, of mercy and compassion, well, if you grow up in that environment, you're going to be formed accordingly and, live a healthy and good life. Okay. Now you grow up in a culture that will bully you, will shame you, will just confused. Well, you're going to be confused. It's going to be hard navigating. And then, so I think that goes back to like the individual affects the community and the community affects the individual.
In your giving talks on theology of the body, what are some of the things people most respond to or get them most excited or the light click on for them?
Yeah.
What gets traction?
So what comes to my mind is, honestly, that it's a vision that helps them to see their dignity. It helps them to see how amazing they are. And there are so many lies youth and young adult are believing, that either I'm bad, I committed this sin, gosh, I'm a terrible person, I'm not beautiful, I'm not wanted. So there are times when in my talks, I'll talk about the beauty, dignity of the body, but then I'll look at them and I'll you are awesome. You are enough. And that's when people will start breaking down.
Yeah.
It's because they'll finally let it sink in, and then they'll come in. It's like, I've been carrying these lies, and it finally sinked in. Mm-hmm. And I think people just, they don't believe it. They might believe it in their head, like, wow, I'm awesome, I'm loved. But deep down, it's like, no, my experience tells me otherwise. How I view myself tells me otherwise.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important and changes people. Something that's, I thought of another high schooler. I talked about the resurrection of the body. It's like, Catholics, we believe in the resurrection of the body, that the body will be divinized in heaven. And this one youth high schooler in a small group was like, wait, are you kidding me? We will be bodily in the resurrection forever? Yeah. And I was like, yeah, God came to save the whole human being.
Right.
And he's like, wait, does that mean what I do with my body matters? And I'm like, boom, you got it. Yeah. So it's, because we don't, a lot of Catholics, I viewed it this way. It's like, no, in heaven, we're spiritual beings, right? We're spiritual. We're like angels. It's like, no, we're human beings, unity of body and soul. God became flesh, and then he took our flesh into the mystery of his very life.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, if you let that, when you let that sink in, and people are just like, whoa, okay, like we talked about earlier, wow, if that's true, the dignity of the body is astounding.
Yeah.
And then once that sinks in, that I'm seeing, you won't treat people like that. You won't have desires to use and abuse if you let that sink in more deeply.
Right.
So, yeah.
And I think too that, when you realize, like, when we mistreat people in some way, it might be verbally or something or whatever, but you just realize too, hey, this isn't fulfilling for me either. I might get a release or a hit from speaking my mind or something.
Yeah.
And I think the same with the hookup culture, that using a person is not going to leave you happier or satisfied.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like you could see that in our celebrity culture, that these people that would, have it all, what our culture says you need. I even think Jim Carrey said this one time. He said he wished everybody could experience like fame and fortune just for a day or something. You realize it's not what we think it is, right?
Yeah. And to know, like, okay, the liturgy and the Mass and the Eucharist is the satisfaction of everything, that can help order all of our longings, and at times we might be in the pain where, okay, I'm not experiencing it, I'm on the cross. But other times it's like, Scripture says, for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross. So it's like, okay, like if I'm enduring crucifixion interiorly, like through virtue and striving, and, like I'm only doing it because there's a joy, there is a wedding feast.
Right.
If there's not, then what, what's it all about?
Right.
We want happiness, we want life. And that's what Jesus came. I came that you might have life. Blessed are you, happy are you. Like and I think a lot of times, like Catholics, it's like, well, I don't know if Jesus really meant that. I mean, look, we're suffering and all this, but we just got to get through it. And it's like, no, that's not the gospel.
Yeah.
Like, I want to be happy. I want to be full of life.
Have life and have it in abundance.
Yeah.
As John Paul said at Cherry Creek.
Yeah.
We just had that reading yesterday, and last week we had John 6 readings, and I looked up this old address that John Paul II, he was on some apostolic visit, and he was speaking to children. He was speaking to children at one point, and he said something like, to pray and talk to Jesus, and he said, and if you want to be happy, stay close to Jesus in the Eucharist. And it was so simple, obviously, but I thought, really, all this, as a preacher, you're doing handsprings and trying to, contort yourself and come up and say the reason this. It's like, basically, if you want to be happy, confess your sins, receive communion, spend some time in his presence. And I when he said that, it just so clicked. And I said, he does sustain us. Yeah. We do have a happiness. And things might be difficult, but, we can still have a joy and a peace that comes from him, from being close to him in the Eucharist.
That's right.
I experienced this like the other day. I was just, whatever, I was worn out, had a bad day, so to speak, and I just went to the chapel and just started praying. And I spent a longer time in prayer and doing the office and rosary and things. But I just felt like God hooked a winch up to me and was like pulling me out of this pit.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't me. I wasn't coming up with these great thoughts, or I wasn't reading my way into a relationship. It was like God was working on me through the Eucharist.
Yeah.
It's like the sun shining on the earth. It warms the earth. Everything grows, plants and animals. That's what the Eucharist is doing.
Yeah. And, something I'm working on right now is self-reliance in my own willpower. Like, that I can somehow achieve my own happiness or my own, fulfillment or following the law.
Right.
And it's like what you said, I can't.
Yeah.
And I just need to learn how to surrender and allow just his his loving gaze, whether the heat of his love to just touch my heart. Or sometimes I might be laying on the ground just, oh Lord, I'm done. I'm exhausted following you. And it's like, just wheel me up.
Yeah.
That's, I'll give that consent, and that sometimes is enough for him.
Right.
Or he just wheels us out of the pit or something.
That's what I've really preached on that more and more the last few years, is just, I look at the sacraments, it's like he's doing, because the Protestants down here in the South, they say, you can't do any works. These works aren't profitable for salvation at all. It's the whole question of faith and works. And I thought, they say, they look at, I think most of them see the sacraments as just symbolic, right? And I'm thinking, no, it's like, that's where God's doing his work on us. You're right, I'm not saving myself through works, but I'm allowing him to, I'm cooperating with him, and I'm allowing him to work on me when I go to confession. He's given me grace to overcome sin.
Yeah.
Not just, maybe he's giving us grace just not to give up.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I'll meet people like that they I'm like, holy cow, you're dealing with a lot of stuff. And I'm like thinking, you're not coming out of this looking great. You're getting beat up. But to me, like, the grace operating there is that you're still standing.
Yeah.
You're still walking forward. That's no small thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
or even just sharing it. Like, having courage to just share your struggle. That's already a grace moving. Like,
right.
I need help. I'm seeking help. Me,
Yeah.
Do you know Monsignor Shea?
Mm-hmm.
He gave a talk at Seek, and it was.
I keep hearing about it. I need to go watch it.
You have to watch it. You have to watch it. It was unbelievable. One of the best talks I've ever heard. Yeah. And he made a point in it where he said, if we never give up, we will always win.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. If we never give up, we will win.
Right.
And Damon Owens, he gave a song one time a few years back at Seek where he talks about, like, we fall down, but we still get up, because a saint is a sinner who falls down, but still gets up.
Yeah.
So, and it might be where it's you fall down and you just say, Lord, help me up.
Yeah.
I can't do it. Yeah. But if we never give up, that's what the enemy wants, just to throwing in the towel.
Yeah.
But
I was with Justin Fatika, he's been on the network a bunch of Hard as Nails ministry, and that's something that he would just tell people, like, don't give up. And he was on the show. We went out to eat, a group of us after, and in the parking lot, they had like a church group in the restaurant. We both kind of left at the same time, and in the parking lot, they were African Americans. It was like, a different kind of culture, and maybe our experience. Justin's from the Northeast and all this, but Justin goes up, just starts talking to him, and he starts, next thing I know, he's giving him hugs and tell him, don't give up, don't give up. Yeah. And they responded, and I feel like there is something in us, I think, that we need that encouragement. We need that God is for us.
Yeah.
And we need to hear that. And, the preacher needs to have that in his message or whatever.
Yeah. But,
I guess I'd say that because, keep walking, because you will get to the end of your journey. Jesus, on the Station of the Cross, he falls 3 times.
Yeah.
Not due to any sin on his part or whatever, but his human nature had limitations or whatever. He fell. I mean, it's such a witness to us to get up.
Yeah. Yeah.
If he fell 3 times, he's giving us an example. Get up.
Yeah. And I think important, something I've learned along my journey of falling and getting up, is we cannot. Sometimes I don't love myself unless I have all my stuff put together, or unless I have this sin or all my sins out of my life. I won't be enough, or I'm not. It's like. No, you're loved right where you are.
Yeah.
Of course, don't stay where you are.
Right.
But, we beat ourselves up through our own failings. And Father Jacques Philippe, he's an awesome writer, in his book, Searching for and Maintaining Peace. he says, if you fall, be at peace. Be at peace. And you should be like, yeah, I'm a sinner.
Yeah.
And then you go to the merciful love of the
Yeah.
Father.
Right.
But always be at peace, because the enemy wants to stir the
Yeah.
pot and make us not be at peace and get all riled up and be
Yeah.
at peace. You
Right.
know, we're loved in our brokenness.
You know, that reading in Mark's gospel, the rich young man, and Mark adds in there about, and Jesus looking upon him loved him. Then he says, come follow me.
Yeah.
I got too much stuff. I got stuff going on.
Yeah.
He doesn't follow. So Jesus, what I like to think about that, Jesus looked at him. He knew he was going to refuse his request to come follow me. Yeah. And he loved him with all his attachments and his stuff, his preferences for this over Jesus. He still loved him.
Yeah. Yeah.
One last question. I know you got to hit the road here, but and you're talking their prayer journal and healing, and tell us about. It seemed like to me like the key thing is like bringing it to the Lord, right? To let Him fill these recesses in our heart. Is that how you describe it?
Yeah, it's so. I'm currently doing journaling right now. Like we talked a little bit about, if you're doing great, like say life is good, and you're happy, and just like you don't need to be digging in for your own wounds. Your wounds will come up just kind of naturally.
Right.
So what I've been doing every morning, and it's having a schedule, because if we want long-lasting healing, this needs to be a daily exercise. It's not just like, I'll pray on Sundays and, I'll just talk with God about the lies I believe about myself or different pains. It's like, no. This needs to be daily. But it could be 10, 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be, but it's, our lies keep us bounded that we believe about ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so I might let's take recently, I was praying, and this was a few days ago, I was just crying, and I was feeling it. And I was just like, Lord, I'm so sad right now. And I was, where is this coming from? Where is this coming from? What lies am I believing? Gosh, I'm all alone. Gosh, I'm alone. These are lies. And he brought me back to, I didn't cuss much as a kid. I still don't cuss. But in high school, I was very pharisaical about it. I'm not going to cuss. And so friends, my best friends, would mock me and say, Brendan, say beep. And I wouldn't. And they would laugh. And in that, he brought me back to that memory where I just felt alone, like I didn't belong. And I was feeling it now, 27 years old, and then I invite him into that memory. Brendan, they don't define you. Mm-hmm. I define you, and you are enough. And that's really what it's about. It's about, there's truths about who we are, that we're strong, we're capable, we're loved, we're enough. That's the truth. But Satan, through other people that hurt us, when we hurt our own selves, the lies come in. Look at you. You're gross. You're stupid. No one wants you. Yeah. And then we make vows and agreements. Yeah, you're right. You're right. This is who I am. It's like, no, it's not. Yeah. And so God, his love and communion come into those places. And that's redemption, Yeah. And it has happened daily. And, if you do that daily, you'll begin to experience more freedom. It could be different freedoms of lust or anger or gluttony, you'll begin to experience more freedom, because all of those sins are just symptoms of deeper wounds. Yeah. We focus on the sin at times. How do I get this sin out? I got to go to counseling. Okay, maybe you do. I just need to get a spiritual director. I need to read this book, read this program. It's like, you might need someone, a mentor, a spiritual director, a counselor, but to help you get out your story and different lies and wounds, right. To allow the loving gaze of Christ into those places. That's been my experience, and I believe that's a great model, and
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking too. Yeah, it could be a repeat of those voices you heard growing up.
Yeah.
Like you said, and that we got to untwist that and let God untwist it. But,
Yeah.
Well, Brendan, thank
Yeah.
you so much for your time and generosity.
Thanks, Father.
Coming
Thank you,
down
Father.
here. And so we're praying for you in your ministry.
Thanks, Father. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.